It's not a coincidence, it's a calling. Sometimes, life leads you here. Not with noise or drama, but with a quiet, persiste plus, like a soft wave brushing against the shore of your awareness. That's what this moment is. You didn't stumble upon this video. It found you, and not because you were lost, but because something inside you has been quietly remembering. There's a point in the journey when what once felt like random events begin to feel like patterns, meaningful, interconnected, unmistakably precise patterns. You start to notice the timing, the way certain words show up exactly when you need to hear them, the way your heart flinches at truth you haven't spoken out loud, the way you feel a resonance with something before your mind can explain why. And this moment right now is one of those. It's not a lesson, it's a reminder, not a roadmap, but a mirror reflecting back to you something you've always known, but may have forgotten in the noise of trying to survive. You see, you weren't born to shrink. You weren't created to conform to a life that feels too tight for your spirit. You came here into this time, this body, this experience to remember who you are beneath all the roles. Not to become something greater, but to shed everything that told you you weren't already. Because you are, you've always been. And no, that's not just poetic language. That's quantum truth. You're not a random accident in a cold universe. You are consciousness expressing itself through form, through skin, through breath, through this very moment of recognition. Somewhere deep within you, something has been whispering, there's more, and not more to chase, not more to earn, but more of you to reclaim, more of your light, more of your clarity, more of your knowing. And the reason this message is reaching you now isn't because you need to be fixed. It's because you've reached a frequency where this truth can finally land. Like a radio tuning into a long-lost broadcast, there's a version of you who has always known, and that version is stirring. Right now, you don't need to believe that yet. But can you feel it? That gentle ache in your chest, not pain, but expansion. The kind of ache you feel when you're standing at the edge of something real, when your soul leans forward and says, This is for you. So many of us live for years wearing someone else's name, someone else's dreams, someone else's definition of what's possible. And then one day, if we're lucky, life cracks the illusion open. Not to punish us, but to set us free. What if this is that day for you? What if this is not the beginning of another self-help sprint, but the end of forgetting? Because you don't need more motivation. You don't need another affirmation to paste over your doubt. What you need, what you already have, is awareness. And awareness changes everything. When you truly see that you are the one generating your reality, not in theory, but in frequency, something deep inside begins to shift. You stop asking, when will it happen for me? And you start wondering, how much of myself have I been withholding? That's the moment the universe stops reflecting your confusion and starts responding to your clarity. So take a breath here. Let it be the kind of breath that feels like coming home. Let it soften the places that have been bracing for disappointment. Let it remind you the seeking can stop now. Not because there's nothing left to grow into, but because you've finally found the doorway within. And maybe, just maybe, this video is the key you've been carrying in your pocket all along. Welcome back to yourself. 1. You no longer feel the need to attract things you're learning to align. There comes a moment, often quiet, often unexpected, when you realize, you're tired. Not just physically, but soul deep tired. Tired of trying so hard to manifest the life you want. Tired of chasing, scripting, visualizing until your heart aches from the effort. Tired of treating the universe like a vending machine, punching in affirmations and hoping for results. And maybe, just maybe, you're starting to see why it never really worked the way you hoped. Because it was never about pulling things to you. It was always about becoming the version of you that those things naturally belong to. That's alignment. And it feels nothing like striving, It feels like allowing. You see, we've been taught often with good intentions that to create the life we desire, we must focus harder, try harder, believe harder. And so we do. We make vision boards. We recite morning routines. We act as if, but underneath all of it, there's often a quiet fear, a belief that we're still separate from what we want, that it's over there, and we're over here. And if we just do enough, we'll somehow earn our way across the invisible gap. But the truth is simpler and deeper. There is no gap. There's only frequency. Everything in this universe is vibrating, including you, including your desires. And when your frequency matches the vibration of what you long for, you don't attract it like a magnet. You reveal it because it was always part of the field around you, waiting, not for your effort, but for your coherence. I've learned this the long way, through years of forcing, of trying to manifest my way out of anxiety, my way out of scarcity, my way into love. And none of it ever felt quite right. It felt hollow, like I was playing a role I didn't fully believe in. But then something shifted. I stopped asking, how do I get that thing? And I started asking, who am I when that thing already belongs to me? That question changed everything, because it brought the power back into my own being, not as a goal to chase, but as a frequency to embody. I stopped performing worthiness. I started becoming resonance. And that's when life began to meet me differently. Not because I finally unlocked some magical formula, but because I finally stopped resisting who I already was beneath the layers of fear, doubt, and conditioning. You see, when you're aligned, there's no need to convince the universe of anything. You are the evidence. You walk differently, think differently, speak to yourself with a kind of quiet certainty that doesn't need loud affirmations to be real. You don't beg. You don't demand. You open. You allow. And things begin to come not because you chase them, but because you remembered how to receive. That's the shift. From attraction to alignment. From trying to trusting. From what do I need to do to who am I willing to be? So if you're in that space right now where you feel exhausted from trying to make life bend to your will, I want you to know something. You're not failing. You're evolving. You're outgrowing the version of yourself that thought she had to fight for her place in the world. You're remembering the truth that's lived in your bones since before you could speak, that you don't need to reach for the life meant for you. You simply need to relax into the frequency of already belonging, and the moment you do, you'll see the things you once chased will begin chasing you. Not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped trying to be what you're not, and gave yourself full permission to be who you are. And who you are is already enough. 2. You're no longer shaken by the silence of others. There was a time when silence hurt, when someone didn't reply, or didn't notice, or didn't acknowledge your truth. It stung, not because you were fragile, but because you were still learning to trust your own voice, still seeking some reflection, some external nod that said, yes, you're on the right path. I know that version of the journey well. I lived in it for years. You pour your heart out maybe in a conversation, maybe in a message, maybe just in the way you show up and the response is nothing, just space, just quiet. And in that quiet, the mind used to get loud. Did I say too much? Was I too much? Did they hear me at all? It's a kind of ache that most people don't talk about, the ache of invisibility. But there's something else that can happen. Over time, after you've sat with enough silence, after you've been overlooked enough times and survived it, after you've watched the world keep turning, even when no one clapped for your growth, something soft begins to emerge, a kind of groundedness, a quiet strength. You begin to realize silence isn't a judgment, it's just silence. And you're still here, still standing, still growing, even without the applause, even without the nod, even without the confirmation you once thought you needed to keep going. Because the deeper you go into yourself, the clearer it becomes. Not everyone can hear your frequency. Not because you're wrong, but because they're not tuned to it. You're not broken. You're just early, ahead of the wave. And that's not a superiority complex, it's just resonance. It's physics. It's life. When you raise your vibration, when you begin to speak from the deep well of your truth, you naturally become incomprehensible to some people. And that's okay. You're not here to be universally understood. You're here to be honest. And honesty, when it's real, is often met with silence at first. Why? Because real truth doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention. It simply exists calm, stable, undeniable, and it waits. It waits for those who are ready to meet it. And so do you. You stop pushing for validation. You stop performing for connection. You stop shrinking to fit into rooms that only celebrate the familiar. Instead, you learn to become friends with the quiet. You sit in it like a sacred space. Because now, silence doesn't always mean absence. Sometimes, silence is the echo of your own alignment. Sometimes, it's the space between the old world and the new one being born through you. And yes, sometimes, it still feels lonely. I won't pretend it doesn't. There are days when you'll wish someone would just say, "I see you." But more and more, you'll realize you're the one who needs to say it. You're the one who sees, and that's what matters. There's a peace that arrives when you stop interpreting other people's silence as a verdict on your worth. When you understand that your resonance isn't for everyone, but it is for someone, and those someones will find you not because you tried harder, but because you stayed true. So, if the silence feels heavy lately, if you're walking through a season where the feedback is minimal and the support is invisible, know this: you're not alone. You're just clearing the static so your signal can shine brighter. You're not being punished. You're being prepared. Prepared for connections built on resonance, not on convenience. Prepared for a life that doesn't require translation to be felt. Prepared for a world where your presence is enough, even in stillness. That's the gift of this stage. You stop chasing echoes and become the voice. You stop waiting for applause and become the rhythm. You stop fearing silence and realize it's not empty. It's full of you. 3. You begin to feel life from the inside out. There's a quiet moment in the journey. No fanfare. No big breakthrough. Just a shift so subtle, you almost miss it. You're standing in your kitchen, maybe, or walking through a grocery store. Maybe the sun is hitting the side of your face just right. Maybe it's raining, and suddenly, there's a pause inside you. A kind of softness, a kind of presence, and for no particular reason, you feel alive. Not excited, not euphoric, just quietly alive. Awake. Here. It's not because something good happened. It's not because you got what you wanted. It's not because anything outside has changed. It's because something inside finally stopped searching. You stopped holding your happiness hostage to outcomes. You stopped measuring your peace by how well the world cooperates. And in that stillness, life begins to reveal itself not as something that happens to you, but something that moves through you. It took me years to understand that real joy doesn't come from what you accomplish. It doesn't come from getting everything lined up perfectly. It doesn't even come from healing everything that's broken. It comes from presence, from waking up, breath by breath, to the sacredness of ordinary moments. You start to notice the texture of silence, the rhythm of your own breath, the way a warm cup of tea fits in your hands, the way the world keeps turning regardless of how fast your thoughts are spinning. And in that noticing, you begin to remember something ancient, something holy, that peace was never hiding in the next milestone. It was always right here, just beneath the noise. We live in a world obsessed with outcomes, with progress, with the next thing. We're taught that joy is something we earn after enough success, after enough transformation, after we finally become better. But the truth is gentler than that. You don't have to become someone else to feel alive. You just have to come back to yourself, to the version of you that's not performing, not striving, not waiting for a sign that it's okay to be happy now. The version of you that already knows how to exhale without permission, that knows how to enjoy the sound of birds without turning it into content. That feels the sacred in something as simple as folding laundry, lighting a candle, or standing still with eyes closed, just to feel what's moving within. That's not detachment, that's aliveness. It's not apathy, it's deep presence. It's the part of you that stopped confusing chaos with momentum and stillness with failure. The part of you that doesn't need life to impress you anymore, because it already feels like enough, just as it is. And when you touch that place, something softens. You stop gripping, you stop demanding, you stop bargaining with the universe. You start being, and in that being, you find something deeper than happiness. You find wholeness, not because everything is healed, but because you're no longer resisting what is. You're no longer living life like it's a to-do list. You're inhabiting it moment by imperfect moment. That's when existence becomes experience. That's when you start living not as a reaction to circumstances, but as a conscious response to presence itself. So if you're noticing lately that you feel calm for no reason, that you feel grateful without checking your bank account, that you feel peace even in the middle of uncertainty, celebrate that. It means something is shifting, something profound. It means your life is no longer measured by how loud it is, but by how true it feels. It means you've started living from the inside out, not as an escape, but as a return back to the quiet, knowing that you don't need more to feel more. You just need to be here fully, breathing, listening, receiving, because this is it. And it's enough. 4. You stop asking when will it come and start living like it's already here. There's a kind of ache that comes with waiting. It's quiet, subtle, the kind that wraps itself around your thoughts at night and whispers, maybe tomorrow. You know the feeling. You've carried it like a soft weight in your chest, sometimes with hope, sometimes with doubt. The hope that someday, what you're longing for, will arrive, the breakthrough, the peace, the relationship, the clarity, the abundance, the next chapter. And so, for a while, the question becomes a companion. When will it come? When will I get there? When will it finally shift? But there comes a turning point, often gentle, sometimes born from quiet exhaustion, when the question itself begins to dissolve, not because you stopped caring, but because something deeper took its place. A new question begins to rise. Am I living like it's already here? That shift changes everything. Because suddenly, you're no longer relating to life as a distant destination. You're relating to it as a frequency, something you can become, not something you have to chase. I remember when this first clicked for me. I was sitting in the middle of a very ordinary day. Nothing dramatic had changed. The bank account still looked the same. The situation hadn't resolved. The outer world still looked, waiting. But something inside me let go. I stopped measuring the distance between here and there. I stopped telling stories about when it finally happens. I just started showing up as if it had already arrived. Not pretending, not faking, but embodying. And what I found was this time is not the barrier we think it is. Time isn't holding things back. Our disbelief is. When you live in a state of waiting, you're energetically postponing your own alignment. You're saying, I'll feel the peace later. I'll breathe easier once it's here. I'll trust when I have the proof. But life doesn't respond to delay. It responds to coherence. The moment you begin being what you desire without needing external permission, that's when the invisible gears start moving. That's when the unseen becomes seen. It's not magic. It's resonance. Think about it like this. You don't wait for the music to play before you dance. You become the dance. And the rhythm finds you. When you move through your day as if love is already guiding you, when you speak to yourself as if clarity is already present, when you make choices as if abundance is already woven into your path. You're not lying to yourself. You're aligning yourself. You're collapsing the gap between what I want and who I am. And in doing so, you're making space for what's already yours to land. The truth is, waiting is often fear dressed up as patience. It says, I'm not sure if I'm ready. I'm not sure if I believe it can be this good. I'll hold back just in case it doesn't come. But what if you drop the just in case? What if you lived like it's inevitable? Not with arrogance, not with entitlement, but with quiet trust. The kind that says, this desire didn't arrive in me by accident. It's here because it's meant to be lived through me. And I don't need to know the how or the when. I just need to be the yes. So, if you're tired of waiting, let that be the invitation. Not to give up, but to step in, to live as if the future you're dreaming of is already unfolding beneath your feet, to dress for the weather you believe is coming, to prepare the space, not out of desperation, but out of deep knowing, because that's when things begin to shift, not because you forced them to, but because you became a match for them, and that's all life ever needed. So today, as you move through your ordinary moments, brushing your teeth, making breakfast, walking into the world, ask yourself, if I truly believed it was already here, how would I carry myself? How would I breathe? How would I respond to this moment? And then start there. Because the answer to when will it come might just be, it already has, and I'm just now learning to see it. 5. Your old wounds no longer weaken you. They illuminate you. There was a time when pain felt like punishment. You looked back at moments of heartbreak, betrayal, collapse, and called them failure. You whispered to yourself, I messed up. I fell apart. I shouldn't have let it happen. And maybe, like many of us, you wore that shame like a second skin, believing that the cracks in you were proof of your fragility. But something's changed now, hasn't it? Somewhere along the line, a deeper truth began to emerge, not in a dramatic revelation, but in quiet hindsight, in the way you now breathe a little softer when you recall what once broke you, in the way you no longer need to defend what hurt, in the way the story has started to rewrite itself not as tragedy, but as transformation. You stopped calling it failure and started calling it refinement, because that's what it was all along. A process of precise, sacred adjustment. You weren't breaking, you were being broken open. And yes, it was messy, it was dark, it felt like loss. But beneath the surface, beneath the part of you that resisted and clung and pleaded, something wiser was at work. Not the ego, not the mind, but the deeper self, the soul, the part of you that knew this version of you couldn't carry you forward. Not because it was bad, but because it was too small, too attached, too built around fear and performance and survival. So life, in its fierce compassion, began to dismantle what you no longer needed. Not to destroy you, but to reveal you. Each heartbreak peeled away another layer of illusion. Each disappointment chipped at the armor you didn't realize you'd been wearing. Each failure cracked the surface just enough for light to get in. And slowly, so slowly, you began to see it. The pain wasn't evidence of your weakness. It was the heat that melted the mold. It was the pressure that created the space. It was the teacher that didn't use words, but left fingerprints on your spirit nonetheless. I look back now on some of the hardest moments of my life, and I don't feel shame anymore. I feel reverence, because those moments, they saved me from a life half-lived. They stripped away everything false, everything performative, everything I thought I had to be in order to be loved or accepted or safe. And they left me with only what was real: stillness, simplicity, truth. I used to think strength meant holding it all together. Now I know real strength is letting it fall apart when it needs to, and trusting yourself to stand in the rubble, breathing, knowing something wiser will rise, because it always does. It's rising in you right now. You might not see it fully yet. You might still be in the in-between where the old story has ended but the new one hasn't fully revealed itself. That's okay. The chrysalis doesn't look like flight. The cocoon doesn't feel like freedom. But the transformation is already happening. You're not falling apart. You're being restructured at a level your logical mind can't yet comprehend. And every moment you choose not to run from the discomfort, every breath you take in the stillness of what you don't yet understand, you're building something unshakable. A self no longer built on proving, a life no longer built on fear. A path no longer controlled by the question, am I enough? Because now, you know. Even the wounds couldn't take that from you. In fact, they gave it to you. They returned you to yourself. So when the old pain rises, when a memory stings or a doubt creeps in, meet it gently, not as an enemy, but as a messenger. It's not there to drag you backward. It's there to remind you how far you've come. You no longer shrink at the sight of your scars. You honor them, because you know now the cracks didn't make you broken. They made you visible, and in that visibility, you became free. 6. You begin to feel like another version of you is whispering the way. There's a particular kind of knowing that doesn't come from books, or teachings, or an experience. It arrives unannounced, soft, unreasonable, clearer than logic, but impossible to explain. And you've felt it, haven't you, that quiet pull? That sudden moment when an idea drops into your heart so gently, yet it changes everything. That whisper of a thought that seems to come from nowhere, but leaves you feeling like you've just remembered something ancient. Maybe you've caught yourself wondering, where did that come from? Maybe it showed up while you were doing something ordinary, washing dishes, driving to the store, staring out the window, and suddenly, something landed, a phrase, a vision, a knowing. It felt like you, but not the version of you you're used to. It felt older, wiser, calmer, clearer. That's not your imagination. That's your future self. The one who already walked through the fire and made it out whole. The one who already found peace, abundance, freedom, not as a destination, but as a way of being. The version of you who has already become what you're still growing into. And they're not far away. They're right here, whispering, not in words, always, but in impressions, in nudges, in the kind of inspiration that doesn't come from your current circumstances, but seems to arrive from somewhere else. Somewhere deeper. You're not alone in this path. You are, in a very real way, collaborating across time. That future version of you, the one who's already embodied the clarity and courage you're reaching for, they're sending signals back. Like light through the trees, like compass points in the dark. They're guiding not by force, not by pressure, but by resonance. And when you're quiet enough, present enough, open enough, you start to feel it. You begin to trust the soft ideas that rise without explanation. You stop dismissing your intuition as wishful thinking. You realize this guidance is me. It's just a version of me that remembers what I've temporarily forgotten. We're so used to looking outside for direction. We ask others what we should do. We wait for signs from the world. We wait for timing, for permission, for certainty. But what if the clearest guidance has been coming from within you all along? Not your anxious thoughts, not your conditioned fear, but your remembered self. The one who already lives on the frequency of what you long for. I've had moments when I was on the verge of giving up, and then, in the silence, a sentence would come to mind. Not a cliché, not a cheerleader voice, but something simple and grounding. Like you're not behind. You're becoming. And it would land with such deep peace. I knew it didn't come from panic or desperation. It came from the part of me that already knows how this turns out. And you have that part too. In fact, it's always been with you. Every time you felt a pull towards something bigger than your current reality. Every time you saw a vision for your life that didn't make sense on paper. Every time you felt like, deep down, you were meant for more but couldn't explain why. That was your future self reaching back. Not to tease you, but to remind you, you're not chasing a fantasy. You're responding to a memory. Because time isn't as linear as we were taught. Consciousness isn't bound by clocks and calendars. And who you're becoming is already whispering to who you are. So the next time an idea rises from stillness, the next time a phrase lands in your chest like truth, the next time you feel that quiet knowing that makes no sense but feels more real than anything else, don't dismiss it. That's not just a good idea. That's a breadcrumb, a message, a meeting point across dimensions of self, and the more you listen, the more the path unfolds. Not because you've figured everything out, but because you've finally begun to trust that the part of you that knows is already guiding the way. And maybe, just maybe, you don't have to figure out the whole map. You just have to follow the next whisper. 7. You begin to witness miracles without feeling surprised. There was a time when synchronicity left you speechless, when the right person appeared at the right time, or when something you had been quietly yearning for showed up without explanation. You used to whisper to yourself, "How is this even possible?" It felt like magic, like the universe had suddenly decided to pay attention. And maybe, back then, you wondered if you had finally earned it, or just gotten lucky. But now, the miracles still come. The signs still show up. The perfect timing still unfolds. Often in ways so specific you couldn't have planned it if you tried. But something's changed. You're not surprised anymore. Not because you've stopped appreciating the wonder of it all, but because you've started understanding it. Not intellectually, energetically, viscerally, from a place so deep inside you. There's no longer a need to be amazed. Because now, it makes sense. Of course it showed up at the exact moment you stopped chasing it. Of course the conversation you needed happened the day you finally released the pressure. Of course the path cleared just as you aligned with peace. You see, when you live in alignment with who you truly are, not who you were told to be, or who you thought you had to be, you begin to resonate with a different rhythm. And in that rhythm, the impossible becomes normal. Not because life suddenly becomes perfect, but because you become coherent, and coherence is what changes everything. When your thoughts, your feelings, your beliefs, and your actions begin to point in the same direction, reality begins to respond, not reluctantly, not sporadically, but predictably, like an echo, like a mirror, like gravity. You don't have to beg for signs anymore. You become the sign. You don't have to ask the universe to show up. You recognize that it never stopped. And the so-called miracles start arriving not as grand, dramatic fireworks, but as soft, subtle confirmations, winks, whispers, gentle nudges from life itself, saying, "Yes, this way, keep going." It's not that the events are less beautiful. It's that your nervous system no longer reacts with shock, but with peace. You don't say, "I can't believe this is happening." You say, "Of course it is." Because when you are truly aligned, magic is no longer an exception. It's the consequence. You begin to understand that what you once called miracles were never rare. They were always the natural result of living in truth. It's just that, for so long, you were living in resistance, in fragmentation, in doubt. So when things did align, it felt like a fluke, a happy accident. But now, your life feels less like an accident and more like a dialogue, a living conversation between your frequency and the fabric of reality. You begin to trust that the intelligence moving the tides and blooming the flowers is the same intelligence guiding your steps. And it no longer feels foreign. It feels familiar, intimate, like coming home to a rhythm you've always known but forgot how to dance to. You stop waiting for the big miracles, because you start noticing the small ones. The way someone says the exact sentence you needed to hear. The way a book falls off the shelf and opens to the right page. The way a sudden clarity arrives, uninvited but undeniable. And you stop needing to explain it. You just breathe, smile, say thank you, and keep walking. Because you know now the universe isn't rewarding you, it's reflecting you. So no, you're not surprised anymore. You're attuned. And that shift from astonishment to embodiment is one of the clearest signs that you're no longer trying to make magic happen. You're living as the version of you who already knows it is happening. Every day, every moment, in ways seen and unseen. And that, to me, is the real miracle. 8. You stop searching for meaning, you become it. There was a time when every challenge made you ask, why is this happening to me? You'd sit in the silence of a hard season, staring at the pieces of something once whole, and wonder what it all meant. You wanted clarity, a sign, a reason. You wanted it to make sense so you could move on, so the ache could have a purpose, so you didn't feel like you were just drifting. I understand that version of you. I've sat in that same place, trying to squeeze meaning out of pain like water from stone, trying to turn every moment into a lesson, every heartache into a breakthrough. And while reflection can be powerful, something eventually shifts. You stop interrogating life. You stop needing everything to carry a message or a moral. You stop turning your pain into a puzzle that must be solved. Not because you've given up, but because you've softened. Because somewhere along the way, you begin to realize you're not here to find meaning in every experience. You're here to live as the meaning itself, and that changes everything. You no longer feel the need to dissect each event, to label it good or bad, right or wrong, gift or punishment. You start allowing it to be what it is: a movement, a breath, a ripple in the river of your becoming. And instead of asking, why did this happen? You begin asking, how can I respond in a way that honors who I truly am? It's no longer about decoding life. It's about embodying presence. You move from analysis to alignment. You realize that the search for meaning was never really about the external event. It was about trying to locate yourself, trying to feel safe, trying to be sure you were still held by something greater, even when life felt chaotic or cruel. But now, you feel it in your bones. You are held, you are guided, and you don't have to prove it anymore. Not to yourself, not to anyone. You're not chasing meaning through every broken thing. You're bringing meaning to every space you enter, simply by the way you show up. Your gaze, your breath, your quiet compassion, your willingness to stay open in a world that has taught us to armor up. That is the meaning. You are the meaning. Your presence, your grounded, honest, open presence is the answer to 1,000 questions you once asked. And that's why you don't need to explain yourself so much anymore. You don't need to wrap your growth in a perfect story. You don't need to justify your healing or narrate your worth. You don't need to find the lesson in every hardship before allowing yourself to rest, because now you've become the embodiment of what you used to search for. And from that space, life doesn't feel random. It feels alive, even when it's quiet, even when it's uncertain, even when it hurts. You're not frantically collecting insights anymore. You're offering something far more valuable: your wholeness. You're not the seeker, endlessly asking life to explain itself. You're the response, the gentle yes to what is, the steady hand on your own heart saying, even this is allowed. And in that surrender, there is peace. Not the peace that comes from understanding everything, but the peace that comes from not needing to. You wake up, you show up, you breathe, you bless the ground. You walk on not because it's perfect, but because you're walking it awake. That, to me, is sacred. That, to me, is meaning made visible. So, if you've stopped searching for a grand revelation in every moment, don't worry that you're disconnected. It may be the clearest sign yet that you're finally connected. Because when you live as the meaning, you don't need to chase it. You simply become it. 9. You no longer just believe you know. There's a quiet moment in every journey where belief gives way to something deeper. It doesn't come with fireworks. There's no grand announcement. No voice from the sky. It usually arrives in stillness. Like a breath. Like an exhale you didn't know you were holding. And in that moment, something shifts. You no longer say, "I'm trying to believe." You simply know, not in the way of facts. Not the kind of knowing that argues or defends or explains, but the kind that lives in your bones. The kind that doesn't need validation because it has already become the ground you walk on. Belief, you see, is a beautiful thing. It's the bridge we walk when we're still learning how to trust. It's what carries us through the fog. When we can't see more than a few steps ahead, belief whispers, "Keep going. Something good is coming." And for a time, it's enough. But eventually, there comes a point where you don't need the bridge anymore, because you've arrived. You're standing on the very land belief was leading you toward. It's no longer a hope. It's a knowing, and it changes the way you move. You stop checking for signs. You stop asking for proof. You stop needing life to show up a certain way in order to feel anchored. Because your anchor is within you now. I remember when this happened in my own life. After years of searching, of reading every book, of following every teacher, of repeating affirmations, and chasing healing, I realized one day, I wasn't trying to believe anymore. I just knew. I knew I was guided. I knew I was loved. I knew I was connected to something bigger, not because someone told me, but because I could feel it in the way I breathed, in the way the world moved with me, in the way my own presence had become enough. There was nothing to prove anymore. And from that place, everything softened. You no longer need to convince yourself that good things are possible. You simply expect them not out of entitlement, but out of resonance. You no longer wrestle with doubt every time things get quiet. You understand that stillness is not absence. It's preparation. You no longer fear the unknown. You recognize it as the very place your deepest wisdom lives. This kind of knowing doesn't shout. It doesn't dominate. It doesn't need to convert anyone else. It simply is. Like gravity, like sunrise, like breath. And from this inner certainty, miracles no longer feel like surprises. They feel inevitable. Peace no longer feels like a reward. It feels like a homecoming. Joy no longer depends on circumstance. It arises naturally from the space within you that's finally stopped trying to earn its worth. You don't have to believe you're enough. You know you are. You don't have to hope that your path is unfolding. You feel it beneath your feet. You don't have to look to the sky and ask if someone's listening. You've become quiet enough to hear the answer that's always been whispered back. You were never alone. This is the shift. From striving to being. From effort to embodiment. From believing in something distant to becoming the living proof of it. And the best part, once you touch this knowing, it doesn't go away. Even if you forget for a while. Even if the mind gets loud again. Even if life gets messy, you'll remember, because it's no longer something outside of you. It is you. So if you've been feeling that sense lately, that deep, unshakable clarity that doesn't need words, you're not imagining it. You've crossed the bridge. You're no longer looking for the truth. You're walking in it. Awakening doesn't need a future moment. You don't need to wait for someday. Not for the perfect timing. Not for the perfect mindset. Not for another sign. Another teaching. Another confirmation that you're allowed to begin. You don't need more evidence. You don't need more healing. You don't need more becoming. Because what if you're not incomplete? What if awakening isn't something you achieve, but something you remember, not by climbing higher, but by softening deeper, not by adding more, but by removing what was never truly yours to carry. The pressure to evolve, to fix, to transform yourself into someone better has always come from the voice of forgetting. The voice that tells you you must earn your way back to wholeness, but you were never separate from it. You're not a project. You're not a problem to solve. You're a presence to return to, and that return doesn't require time, it requires permission, your own. To live like someone who already knows, to breathe like someone who no longer chases, to move through your day not looking for proof, but offering it through the way you show up, the way you pause, the way you see. You see, awakening isn't loud. It doesn't always look like a breakthrough or a revelation. Sometimes it looks like a quiet morning, when nothing extraordinary happens, but somehow, you feel at peace anyway. Sometimes it's the moment you stop trying to fix your sadness and just sit with it like an old friend. Sometimes it's choosing kindness toward yourself for no other reason than you're tired of being at war. That's awakening, not a moment you wait for in the distance, but a shift that happens the moment you stop searching for what you've always had. And maybe that's what's happening right now. Maybe, just by reading these words, something is remembering, not your mind, but your knowing, not the part of you that seeks, but the part of you that recognizes, the part that's always known. You don't need to become, you just need to come back. Come back to the breath that's already enough. Come back to the stillness that doesn't need permission to be sacred. Come back to the version of you that's not striving, or performing, or proving, just being. Because in the end, that's all awakening ever asks. Not for you to be more, just for you to be here, fully, honestly, tenderly. And if you've come this far, if you felt something stir while reading these words, if something inside you has exhaled and said, yes, this feels like home, then maybe you've already begun. Maybe you're not waiting anymore. Maybe you're remembering, and that remembering, that's the seed, that's the spark. That's where it all begins. Not someday, not when you're finally ready, but now, because you were never meant to chase the light. You were meant to realize you are it.